Conference Championship weekend is here, and there's no better place to come to for some game breakdowns than right here on Always Talking Ball. Tyler Noe, Lance Barton. Again, big thank you to everyone who tuned in to our live show on Tuesday night on X and YouTube. If you're listening right now, hit that subscribe or follow button. Lance has done an absolutely fantastic job this season, putting out some killer videos for us on Instagram and TikTok to drive some interaction. And boy, was there some interaction. I'd say probably 95% of that stuff is good comments. About 5% people go positive or they go personal. We're just not here for it. You know, we can debate this sport.
Yeah, if you want to be a social media troll, you go right ahead. You're a loser.
Yeah, we can debate the sport while still being respectful, understanding. It's just a game, fucker, right? So it's just a game.
That was great, dude. That caught me off guard a little bit. That was good.
Yeah. We're going to be in Indianapolis this weekend. Of course, I am every weekend, but Lance is coming into town this weekend. We're going to be here for the Big Ten Championship game that we're going to break down later on in this episode. So if you're listening and you're going to be in Indy this weekend, you want to meet up, hit us up. We'll be downtown before the game, watching some of the other championship games, especially the SEC championship game and everything. But Lance, let's get things started. Let's just kind of talk a little bit if we had anything else to say about playoff rankings and all that stuff. And I guess I can go ahead and start off since I always let you go first, but I'll go first this time. I jotted down a couple things here, and I just wanted to ask like a blanket, statement or a blanket question to everybody listening out there, whether you're a fan of, I don't know, Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, Alabama. You guys have all complained for years and years and years, Notre Dame just getting to kick their feet up on conference championship weekend. How do y'all feel now?
Man, there's a lot of people kicking their feet up on conference championship weekend this year.
Yeah, just relaxing.
Yeah, just relaxing, and they're in the playoffs. Pretty much all those teams you just said, except Alabama, is comfortably in the playoffs this year. So, and yeah, I mean, it's just something, man, that people are going to have to get used to. And obviously, from the hundreds of comments that we got on the posts on Instagram Reels and on TikTok, that there's still a lot of people. We said this before the season. I warned people about this before the season, that the norm of just thinking about so-and-so has less losses means that you're going to get in and you're better. Now, again, that's partially the committee's been doing that for the most part this year still, but you're going to have to retrain your brains on who gets in and who doesn't and what's considered good, what's considered not. I mean, it's already a beautifully flawed sport in general when you've got 130-something teams and all these different conferences, and conferences aren't created equal, and you're not playing the same schedules. And now you've got these super conferences, and you've got scheduling imbalances within their own conferences, i.e. Texas or i.e. SMU or Penn State, Indiana. I mean, teams have weaker conference schedules than others within the conference. So, it's just it's a different year, man. But What were you want? Was that what you wanted to say in regards to the playoff? Or did you have something else?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned beautifully flawed, and that's a great way to put college football. I wrote down this is the dumbest, most awesome sport in the world, and we get to talk about it. But they have one of the most dumbest postseason setups in sports right now, and it's not surprising. That's just the way NCAA rolls, but.
It was always the greatest regular season of any sport and the worst postseason of any sport. Yeah. It was the only sport where the regular season was more emphasis was put on the regular season than the postseason until now.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's all everybody talks about now is this 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
Nick Saban warned people of that when it went to a 4-team playoff. And obviously, it's become that even more with a 12-team playoff.
Yeah, and I think that, it hasn't necessarily dumbed down the regular season from like a watching standpoint. Like the games are still awesome. They're still exciting.
Yeah.
But the more you keep growing, obviously, you get more product to watch, which is great. But there's a real shot that we're not going to most years you can have the national champion not being the best team all season. And you've seen that in sports
just like college basketball.
But you've seen that in sports like Major League Baseball. They had a great postseason when they had 4 teams, and even when they went to that 1-game wild card with 5 teams, now they've got 8 teams in there, and you get wild card teams that can win a 3-game series against the Dodgers, and they're like the Diamondbacks, and make it to the World Series.
Yeah, who's hot at that time?
Exactly. So it does kind of dilute the regular season a little bit. But for us, I mean, we love watching the game. So I know, and we talked about this right before we hopped on. I was going to talk about ranked wins. And yes, I'm talking to my co-host here. He's on the ranked wins train, and we've talked about it so many times before. Like, we probably should figure this out, and honestly, the committee should probably figure this out from the get-go next year. But is a ranked win, like, I feel like we talked about it before, how it should only be able to help you and not hurt you as the season goes on. Like, again, we talked about it. Oregon, when they beat Boise was not ranked, right? They weren't ranked at that time. And that win has only gotten better for Oregon. That's a great case. When Texas beat Michigan, Texas was number 10 in the country. They ended up being 7-5. And like,
you mean Michigan? Michigan was number 7 in the country.
Texas beat Michigan. Michigan was number 10 in the country.
10, got it.
They ended up being 7-5. Why is that? How is that Texas's fault? Like, why would Texas be punished for Michigan failing to win more games the rest of the season, and then again beating Ohio State at the end of the season? Like, and they're still not ranked. I mean, we've got to do better. We've got to do better than talk about ranked wins. We bash the committee every single chance we get, and then 2 seconds later, we put all of our trust in them that they get a team like Mizzou right at 19 or Memphis at 25. Like, what are we doing with Memphis at 25?
Or
like
Army,
a win,
or Army at 24.
Okay, so like Notre Dame's wins over Louisville, Texas A&M, and USC are so much more impressive than their win over Army. That they get credit for a ranked win against Army. Like a win, like I told you the other day, a win over Florida is so much more impressive than a win over Memphis.
Yeah, I've been guilty of saying that Miami has no good wins. I mean, their win at Louisville.
Here's the thing. When you go to ESPN right now, you can go back and look through everybody's games. Okay, so I'm not stumping. I'm not stumping for Miami one bit. But you can go through everyone's games, and it'll tell you where everyone was ranked at that time.
Yeah,
Miami did not play a single ranked team all season.
Yeah,
Indiana did not play a single ranked team all season except for Ohio State. SMU, at least when they played Pitt was number 18 at that time.
Yeah.
Like, so it's just, we've got to have we need a set rubric of data points that the committee is going to consider, and I'm not sure if we're ever going to get it.
No, I don't disagree. And something like, I'll give an example of what we're talking about here. Like, some people were, of course, bashing me for saying that Alabama had 3 quality wins, and I was including Missouri in that. And people were like, Missouri sucks. Missouri's booty cheeks or whatever. First off, Missouri doesn't suck. They're not booty cheeks. The team that they were comparing them with, they were like, you're giving Alabama so much credit for beating Mizzou, but Miami's got better wins against Duke and Louisville and teams like that. Here's the thing. I think, again, this is opinion-based. I think if Missouri and Duke lined up on a neutral field this week, I think Missouri would win that game. Probably a good football game. I think Missouri wins that game.
Probably
but it might be a good football game.
Spread.
Yeah, Missouri and Louisville on a neutral field. That's a really good football game. A really good football game. Probably, that's honestly very equal teams.
Yeah, if you're watching us, I'm looking down. I'm looking at the K Ford rankings, and he's got Louisville by 4 on a neutral field in that game.
Louisville by 4 on a neutral field. Okay,
yeah.
So that's a pretty close.
But again, like Missouri and LSU, like Alabama should get way more credit for that win at LSU,
absolutely,
than this Missouri win. Like,
agreed.
But again, you're just looking at what they're ranked at the end of the season, and like on Mac and Cube yesterday when Rhett Lashley was on there, he talked about, we're just going to talk about a team's 3-1 versus a team is 0-1 in a ranking that you guys just actually set the ranking. So like it just doesn't make a lot of sense, and I know we continue to get frustrated, but whatever.
Yeah, I don't disagree, man. But I'll say this: I don't know what the exact answer is to any of this. And the last thing I want to say in regards to the playoff, with Alabama being over Miami, again, some people's minds are boggled by how can this team with one more loss than the other team get in. And again, it's got to do with the resume, the total body of work, and the overall resume. But almost all of you, and including me, were very excited and really wanted this 12-team playoff. And one of the main reasons was that most other people, not me, but other people were excited about in regards to this, was it was going to have more inclusion, give teams more chances to get in. And a lot of people warned you that what this was inevitably going to do was going to allow the teams with the most talent and your most talented teams more mulligans. Like Ohio State, for example. If the 14 playoff are still around, Ohio State's gone. The most talented team in the country would be out of this right now. But they're still alive and well and can win the national championship. Georgia, one of the most talented teams in the country. Now, granted, they're playing for the SEC championship, so if they win, they would probably still, not probably, they would be in a 14 playoff. But if they would go to lose to Texas this week, they would not be in that 14 playoff. They're in the playoff no matter what. Whether they win or lose to Texas this week, they're going to be in the playoff. So there's another mulligan that Georgia gets. Bama right now is in this playoff. If Clemson beats if SMU beats Clemson, Alabama's going to be in this playoff. They've lost 3 games. That's multiple mulligans that they've been allowed. That's what they've created with this new 12-team playoff. Yep. And they're talking about adding 14 teams or 16 teams. Sure, that might get in an extra team or two from the Big 12 or the ACC or whatever, but it's also a much better chance to get teams like Ole Miss in this thing that on any given Saturday, when you tee it up, if Ole Miss gives their best, if you get Ole Miss's best effort, they can beat anybody in the country. Yeah. That's what you're creating with this, with adding more teams. So,
and like the more losses thing, it's nothing new in college sports. We just saw it last year. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know the exact team, but I'm sure there was a 19-13 team in a Power 4 conference in basketball or Power 5 that had the 19-13 record, and they got in over 30-3 Indiana State on the very last day.
Oh yeah, dude. There are a lot of people commenting that there's no other sport where teams have more losses get like ranked ahead of other teams, and I'm like, literally almost every other sport that happens. There's division winners in the NFL that are like barely above 500 that get higher playoff seeds than teams that other divisions that have much better records, but they didn't win their division. That's literally the same thing that's going on now in college football. The exact college baseball, college softball, college basketball. It happens in every single sport.
Yep.
College football is the only sport that it hasn't happened a ton in up to this point. Now, with a larger playoff field, just like every other sport, just like all the other college sports, just like the pro sports, you're going to see it more and more going forward. We're already seeing it now, and it's going to continue to happen.
Yep.
And the last thing, I know I said the last thing a minute ago. This really is the last thing. These teams going for the 11th and 12th spots in a 12-team playoff are all going to be flawed. They're going to be flawed going forward. They're going to have flaws now and forever going forward. Teams ranked 11 and 12, 13, 14, 15. They're there for a reason because they have flaws. Good football teams. Miami's a good football team. South Carolina's a good football team. Ole Miss, Alabama, they're all good football teams. They're not great. They're not elite.
Yeah.
They all have major flaws. But somebody has to get the 11th and 12th spot. And this year, at this point, I know the committee hasn't done this for other rankings, but for that specific ranking, it looks like they went by resume, strength of record, strength of schedule, who you've beaten. That looks like what they used for that specific criteria. Where I will hear your arguments are, though, they didn't apply that to other rankings. They're just flying by the seat of their pants and just putting whatever metric and whatever rule and whatever they want to put at certain positions. So that's where we're at.
Well, yeah, and last thing I'll say, I might piss some fan bases off here, but if I'm Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina, if they should be upset with anybody, it should be SMU, Indiana, and Boise State.
I agree.
It should not be Alabama.
I agree. 1,000%.
Okay. Yeah. So
thank you for saying that. I can't. I'm proud of you, dude.
Listen, we're the biggest Indiana fans on here. I mean, we love that team. Great team. They've had a great season. SMU, great season. Boise State, good season. I'm not going to dive into it right now. We're going to talk about conference championships, but you guys know where we're going with this. Those are the teams that you should be pissed off at. So, we're we can expand on that further maybe next week. So let's get to our ATB marquee matchups brought to you by Home Field Apparel. ATB 15 for 15% off at checkout, homefieldapparel.com. Lance, we have not seen a conference championship weekend with no 7+ point favorites since 2006.
That might be the best thing that this mega conference deal has given us.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Where else should we start off but Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. Georgia Bulldogs versus Texas Longhorns. Texas favored by 2.5 in the game. Kirby Smart and Georgia are heading to their 7th SEC championship game. Bulldogs are 2-4 straight up and 3-3 against the spread in those games. Kirby's 104-18 straight up overall in his coaching career with Georgia. 22% of his losses have come in the conference championship game. He's just 5-7 straight up, but 8-4 against the spread as an underdog with Georgia. So that helps him here. Obviously winning against Texas as an underdog earlier this year as well. And since the inception of the SEC championship game back in 1992, the favorite is 25-6 straight up, but only 14-16-1 against the spread. 2 of those 6 losses have come from Georgia as a favorite versus the Alabama Crimson Tide. So we've seen Georgia in this game, 4 years in a row now. The last 3 years they came into it undefeated every year and only won one of those. And it's going to be an interesting game. It's a good rematch. Georgia went into Austin earlier this year and just punked the Longhorns on their home field from the very get-go. The Georgia offense really didn't do a lot of damage against the vaunted Texas Longhorns defense, but it just looked like the Longhorns offense, Sark, Quinn Ewers, they just weren't ready for the moment at that time, even at home. And so I think it'll be a good test for both these teams. They're both going to make the playoffs, but I think it'll be a good test. One thing I'm looking forward to seeing is I think we're going to see quite a bit of Arch Manning in this game because we saw what Haynes King was able to do last week against that Georgia defense. Arch has got the legs on him. We saw what he did against A&M coming in with those packages. Ewers is probably 90% right now with that ankle, so not 100% healthy. I think Arch has a chance to come in and make a big difference on the ground for the Longhorns in this game.
Yeah, and we every time we break down a big Georgia game, we talk about what's the weakness against Kirby Smart. That Kirby Smart, Nick Saban style defense. It's dual threat quarterbacks that can move. If you were just a standing target that's going to, if that defensive line and Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann and all that brain power on that defense, if they know where you're going to be, where your quarterback's going to be, they can come after you and come get you. Because again, most teams just don't have the defensive lineman that Georgia has. There is a very few teams in college football that have guys like that. And it's been like that for years. I mean, there literally is only probably 4 or 5 teams that have defensive linemen that can match, and as many of them as Georgia has. We saw that in that Texas game. Guys, Texas had 29 yards rushing against Georgia earlier this year. You just saw what Texas did against Texas A&M. So that tells you just how impressive that it really was that when Georgia showed up in a bad mood and showed up and went into the Death Star mode is what people call it. When they went into the Death Star mode in Austin of what that defensive line could do. And since that game, it's been more of what we saw before that game. Going into that game, nothing that our eyeballs told us that Georgia was going to go in and punk Texas and Austin. But yet again, they did. Since that game, there's nothing that my eyeballs have told me that makes me think that Georgia is just going to wear Texas out in this game. But in Georgia's, some of their biggest games this year, they've stepped up and played well. I know they lost on the road at Ole Miss. Yes, that happened. But they did go into Texas and spank them. They did spank Tennessee. They beat both of those teams who are ranked in the committee's top 10 right now, but double digits. But something that I wanted to point out. It's weird that going into this game that when you think about Georgia, you normally would think that Georgia's going to have the advantages on defense. Georgia has all the advantages in the rush game. And that's just not the case by the numbers. But something that I was curious about, because going into that Texas-Georgia game earlier in the year, the number one thing that we did not know about Texas was, and again, it's not Texas's fault that Michigan turned out to be what they turned out to be. But Texas's strength of schedule compared to Georgia's is laughable. And honestly, again, Texas had the second easiest schedule of any team in the Southeastern Conference this year as far as conference schedule is concerned. Again, that's not Texas's fault. That's Greg Sankey's fault, and that's the front office's fault for the Southeastern Conference. I'm not knocking Texas for that. I'm just honestly stating facts here. That's just what it is. Texas is the number 2 defense in the entire country. They're number 2 ranked defense in the entire country. But I went a little deeper into this, and I said, okay, that's great that you've got the number 2 defense, but, who did you do that against? Here's some numbers for you. So far this year, Georgia has faced 6 offenses that are ranked in the top 40 in the country in total offense. Nobody else has faced more. Texas has only faced 2. One of those was Georgia. Georgia has faced 5 offenses ranked in the top 20 in the nation in scoring, more than anybody in the country. The best scoring offense that Texas has faced this year, Georgia, at 25. Texas has faced 2 rushing offenses ranked in the top 50. 2. Georgia has faced 5. Where I'm getting at is, that is where you can see, Georgia has played one of the toughest strength of schedules in the entire country. And then when you actually take deep dives into the numbers, maybe Georgia's defense is not ranked as high as someone like Texas because Georgia is facing Tennessee, Ole Miss, Alabama, Clemson, much better teams than what Texas has faced. So we're going to find out Saturday. Again, is Texas's defense really that for real? Or is it propped up a little bit because they faced poor offenses? It could be both. Again, it's one of those things that it turns out to be one of my favorite sayings this year. There's more than one truth. There could be 2 truths to this. Texas's defense could be propped up, but they could also be for real. And then regards to the offensive numbers, something I thought was interesting. When you think of Texas this year and you think of Sark and you think of when you watch Georgia this year, their offense just doesn't look very good. They really don't. Texas averages 34 points per game on offense, and Georgia averages, Texas averages 34.8 points per game on offense this year. Georgia averages 34.1. And again, Georgia has faced tougher competition. So there's not really that much of a difference there. So let me ask you, Tyler, where do you think in this game, where does Texas have the biggest advantage?
I think it's, first I got to know if Kelvin Banks is going to be at left tackle for Texas. He went out in the first quarter against Texas A&M. So I want to know if Kelvin Banks.
These listed him as questionable.
He's questionable right now. I don't think we're going to be seeing a lot of Trevor Etienne at running back, considering he just put his name in the transfer portal.
I did a bunch of research on that before the game. Julian Humphrey, the corner for Georgia, and Trevor Etienne. Dude, there's no word anywhere if they're playing or not playing. I figured, they're definitely not playing. I don't think Etienne's going to be playing.
He's questionable on the list right now, and Humphrey's not even on there, I don't think.
Yeah, and there's already quotes from Kirby Smart that said that he wasn't even close to playing last week. Mm-hmm. He was listed as questionable, but he wasn't even close to playing injury-wise last week. And Georgia's got other tailbacks that are actually coming back. They've had a lot of injuries at that position this year. 2 of those guys are probably going to play this week. Branson Robinson, I think, is possibly back. There's Roderick, something whatever. There's multiple guys for Georgia are possibly going to be back at the tailback position this week to back up Frazier, the superstar freshman that they've got out of Modern Day high school. So, yeah, I don't think Etienne, but I honestly don't know that really matters that much if he's going to play or not. Julian Humphrey, though, at corner, that's interesting to me that, again, there's a lot of quotes out there. There's nothing saying that he's playing or not playing.
Yeah.
Kirby actually said that that's news to him. The transfer portal is not even open yet, so I don't know how you can say you're in the transfer portal when there's not even open yet. So I don't know if he's playing or not playing. But that's obviously not a good look that you've got 2 of your fringe starters that are announcing they're going to the portal the week of the SEC championship game.
Yeah. I think Georgia's going to have the crowd edge here. Obviously, it's in Atlanta, but I mean, Texas fans are going to travel, and they don't care that they're going to have to travel.
First SEC championship game ever, they'll be there.
They don't care that they're going to have to travel 3 or 4 more times here in the next month and a half either. So they got that oil money down there in Texas.
So they got money. They got money. Come on now.
Yeah. So I mean, still proximity wise, I'm maybe 60-40 Georgia fans.
I was going to say, I bet that Texas travels extremely well to this game.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I just I think Texas's defense does have an edge. I know the numbers you said. I think they still do have an edge. I think they can force Carson Beck into some tough situations, into some turnovers. Nobody's really been impressed with Georgia's skill position players all year long. So I'm not sure if they can do a lot of damage.
That's their biggest problem, man. The amount of they literally lead the nation in drops.
Yeah.
That's hard to do. Think about that. That's not just Power 4. That's Group of 5 too. They lead the nation in drop passes. That's awful.
Yeah. So it'll come down to I think it's a tight game. I think it's a lot closer game than it was last time.
Yeah. I think there'll be less than 7 turnovers like there were last time too.
Yeah, less than 7 turnovers. Yeah, if you remember Georgia got out to a 23-0 lead. Texas eventually brought it back to 8. Was the deficit, ended up being a 15-point deficit. So
I also think Texas's D-line is Texas's front 7 in general. Like, again, Texas did a really good job against Georgia. I mean, Georgia only had 283 total yards in that game last time, and they gave Georgia a short field 4 different times.
Yep.
And Georgia still only amassed 30 points in that game total. So
that's the thing. I think if they do not give Georgia short fields and they don't turn it over in their territory, it's going to be a lot tougher on Georgia this time. I
think both of these offenses, man, are going to have a really tough time, again, against these elite defenses. You're going to have to hit explosive plays.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how you're going to be able to just consistently for 4 quarters to be able to sustain long drives against, like Texas had, like, how they ran the football last week against Texas A&M. Like, at some points during that game, I was like, I mean, when the hell does Texas A&M had the ball? Like in the last, have they even been on offense? Like Texas just controlled the line of scrimmage and control. I don't think they can just control. If they do control the line of scrimmage against Georgia, they're going to win this game.
Yeah.
But I don't think that you can just line up and run the football off tackle without a dual threat quarterback helping you against this Georgia defense. But I also don't think that Georgia can do that either against this Texas defense. So I do think both defenses are going to control this game. Who can force some turnovers? Who can force the catastrophic mistakes in this game? And who's more likely
to turn the ball over between Beck and Ewers?
Well, it's been Beck more this year, but
Ewers had a couple I mean, I know that ball was tipped that got pick 6 last week, and he fumbled again in the red zone the next drive. But I just think, it's going to be a good game either way.
I'm picking Georgia.
Okay, Lance is on the record.
I'm picking Georgia this week. I got burnt last time. I may get burnt again this time, but I'll live with it if I get burnt this time. I said before the season even started that no way Georgia was going to go into Texas and lose that game. They were going to go into Death Star mode, all that. And then when the week of the game came along, I said I wasn't going to let my eyeballs lie to me, and they did lie to me. I think that Georgia's defensive line is going to cause a lot of problems for Ewers again. I believe in Sark and think that Sark is one of the best offensive play callers in all of college football. But again, it's really hard to call plays when you can't block the other team.
Yeah.
And I don't know that Texas is just going to be able to just all of a sudden, just because there's a few weeks later, is just going to be able to block Georgia again. I think Texas has looked like the better team all year long. That's obvious. But I still think that Texas has not played that tough of a schedule. A lot of their numbers are propped up, defensive numbers especially, are propped up because of who they've played. I think it's a great game as well. I think it's going to be a one-possession game. But I think that there is a chance that Carson Beck actually plays better than what he's played mostly throughout this year. and he's a little more consistent in this game, and I think Georgia gets it done. And I think that defensive line for Georgia just causes problems again for Ewers, and the Dogs get it done in a very close, hard-fought game in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Yeah, we've said all year long Texas's offense is just kind of leaving a lot to be desired out there.
Yep.
And I just can't see. It could just be a matchup thing here where they look like the better team all year, but when they play Georgia just got the edge on them for some reason. And it could just be a matchup here, bad matchup for them. And so if Georgia, does beat Texas, that would probably avoid a possible rematch in the quarterfinals between these two as a 2-7 matchup. So that would help things go a long way with not seeing, 3 matchups within the span of, 2 months here. So I'm going to pick Georgia in the game too, as well. I think that they're going to go in there and they're going to get the job done. Kirby's not going to lose 3 straight SEC championship games. And he's not going to allow Texas to come in the SEC and win their first season in. So I'm going to pick Georgia.
Okay. Quick question. Do you think, I already know the answer, you don't think they will? I believe if Oregon loses and if Georgia wins this game, I think the winner of this game, if Oregon were to lose to Penn State, I believe the winner of this game is going to be the number 1 overall seed in the playoff. I think that Georgia would be over Penn State. I know you disagree, and I get it. I understand why. But I just don't know how they would justify that with the fact that Georgia then would have 4 wins in the top.
Here we go again with these ranked wins.
I mean, there's pretty good wins. They're not just ranked wins.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm not saying they're bad.
They're wins against some of the most highly power rated teams in all of college football.
Yeah.
So, and the strength of schedule would be significantly through the roof in comparison. Yep. But yeah, we don't have to get into that debate right now. We can debate that on Sunday.
Okay. Speaking of that, Saturday night, Lucas Oil Stadium, Indianapolis, Indiana.
Can't wait to be there. My first trip there.
We will be there at the game. Penn State versus Oregon. Oregon 3.5-point favorites right now. They enter the Big Ten Championship as the sole undefeated team in college football. Undefeated teams in conference championship games are 37-17 straight up since 1992. But when they're favored under 5 points, they're just 6-9 straight up in those games.
Hey, James Franklin playing with house money, bro.
Speaking of James Franklin, I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah.
We all know what kind of coach he is. He's 7-25 straight up as an underdog, and he's 92-15 straight up as a favorite. Penn State has not won a game outright as an underdog since September of 2021 against Wisconsin, losing 9 in a row. And against top 5 opponents, Franklin's 1-16 straight up, 5-12 against the spread in his coaching career at Penn State and at Vandy. Oregon fans are, I would think, similar to Texas, first year in the conference. They'll probably travel to Indy, kind of get a taste of it.
Yep.
They're also going to have a lot of travel, probably a lot more than Texas, kind of being on one coast. They're going to have a lot more travel here in the next couple weeks. Penn State hasn't been in this game since 2016. Interestingly enough, Ross Dellinger tweeted out, and I sent it to you last night, some of these prices, these get-in prices for these championship games, which you and I got tickets, back when they came out, kind of figuring maybe it's Oregon, Ohio State. That didn't pan out. I think Ohio State fans are dumping a lot of their tickets right now. And also it's the fact that both these teams are safely in. This game is not a play-in game anymore. So it's not necessarily like a super important game for a lot of these fans when you are thinking we might have, 3 other places to travel. Might have to go to Pasadena, might have to go to Dallas, might have to go to Atlanta. All these different places you might have to travel here in the next month and a half.
Yep.
Why would you go to Indianapolis? So it's interesting. It's an interesting dichotomy here. Also, with number 1 versus number 3, like you mentioned in our Georgia segment, we talked about if Oregon loses this game, would Penn State move up to that 1 seed or would they fall to the 2 seed if Georgia were to win? So we just don't know. There's a lot of unknowns here. With the spread of 3.5, though, just getting right into the nuts and bolts of it, why would we not be betting Oregon?
I'm glad you asked. I thought the same thing originally on the surface. I also was shocked that the line was that low. I told you and guessed the spread. I think I said, what, 6.5 is what I thought it was. So I was about 3 or 4 points off. So I had to do some digging and into some nuggets into the matchup here. And again, I'm going to give some numbers here, kind of like I did in regards to the Georgia-Texas game. This was very surprising to me. Listen to how close all this is, and listen to how many numbers that Penn State is ahead of Oregon in. Total defense, Penn State's 4th in the nation and Oregon 7th in the nation. Scoring defense, Penn State 6th in the nation, Oregon 9th in the nation. Rush defense, Penn State 7th in the nation, and Oregon is 22nd in the nation. Turnover margin, Penn State +7, Oregon +5. Pass defense, Penn State is 7th and Oregon's 8th. Tackles for a loss, Penn State is 18th, Oregon is 33rd. Oregon is 6th in the nation in sacks. They're really good at getting after the quarterback. Penn State is ranked 6th in the nation in giving up sacks. Total offense, Oregon's 15th and Penn State's 19th. And you think Oregon, high-flying offense, Penn State, they're not really that good offensively. You know, they're still kind of bueno. Kotelnicki's done a good job this year with Penn State, but it's still just not, one of your big-time offenses in college football. You don't really think that about Penn State. I just told you there's only 4 spots difference in total offense. Scoring offense, Oregon's 35 points per game and Penn State's 33 points per game. All of those numbers, that's like a ton of numbers I just gave you on both sides of the ball. They're all extremely close. And Penn State actually is better in a lot of those categories, ahead of them in a lot of those categories. Again, those numbers don't just mean that you're a better football team or anything, but like it's just interesting that they were as close as they were. As far as the actual matchup in this game on the field, dude, I think it really comes down to Penn State's got some NFL dudes on that defense. They absolutely do. They absolutely do. And they've got a guy that your game plan on offense could be one thing, and then it could be a totally different thing because it is completely wrecked because of Abdul Carter. Pass rusher for Penn State, linebacker for Penn State. There have been games where you've seen that dude get completely turned loose. And again, this is one of those, I've heard Greg McElroy talk about this. He talked about it with Ole Miss this year and some of their bigger games, the game against Georgia. You saw Ole Miss look like sharks in blood-infested waters. That's because they've got guys that are front runners that they know that that's an NFL money game going against Georgia. This is a money game for some of your big-time NFL draft prospects for both of these teams. But a guy like Abdul Carter that is already projected to be a pretty high NFL draft pick, he goes out in a game like this and just wrecks it and is just living in the backfield, draft stock up even more. Makes more millions of dollars in a game like this. So, and we've seen Oregon have some issues here and there throughout the year. The offensive line has gotten so much better since they fixed it earlier in the year. But still, they haven't faced a pass rusher like Abdul Carter. Also, Penn State's got 2 really good corners that have played really well this year. So it's interesting to see what they're going to do against Tez Johnson and some of those receivers for Oregon. Oregon's got some of the best collection of weapons in the entire country. But the last thing that worries me the most, if I'm thinking about Penn State, the thing that worries me the most, and I think I can see Tyler almost smirking about it, I think he's probably agreeing with what I'm about to say. The overall speed differential in this game. Like, there's times when you watch Penn State, like I remember in the first half against USC.
I knew you were going to say that. Yep.
First half against USC, Penn State looked like they just took a bunch of guys from the movie Hoosiers and put Ollie and Jimmy Chitwood and some of those in football uniforms, and they were chasing around USC skill position players. And then I don't know what happened. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that know way more about X's and O's. But Penn State came out in the second half and completely flipped the switch. But still, the difference in the skill position players overall from Oregon and Penn State, it definitely is different. It's completely different. It's like a big difference in speed. And the fact that Penn State I just can't believe that a high-level P4 program like a Penn State, that they don't have, in 2024 college football, I mean, their receivers, man, overall are just garbage. They are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's just call it what it is. Like, in comparison to, like, other, like, big-time, top-tiered college football teams. Now, they got Tyler Warren, the tight end, who is one of the most exciting players in college football that can take over a game. And they've got Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And Kotelnicki, depending on the rumors that you're hearing, is he entertaining the West Virginia job this week? Is he as dialed in as he needs to be to call up ball plays against Oregon? I have no idea the answer to that question. I'm assuming that he is dialed in for this week, obviously in a Big Ten championship game. But I just don't know as far as manufacturing offense overall for Penn State. I mean, Oregon's got some really good DBs that are NFL players. I don't know how Penn State's receivers are going to get open. They're going to have to manufacture. They might have to run a play where Tyler Warren lines up and snaps the ball from the tight end position and then runs down the seam and catches jump balls. They may have to do stuff like that in this game. And I also just don't necessarily trust Drew Aller either.
Yeah.
I tried my best, man, to want to try to back Penn State in this game. I actually do think, again, it's another one. I do think it's going to be a really good. I think we're going to see a good one. I do think James Franklin playing with house money. The last time that Penn State won a Big Ten championship was in 2016 when they replaced both coordinators going into the season. That's what they did this year. Oregon, we saw what they did in the Pac-12 championship game last year against Washington. Got thumped against Washington in the Pac-12 title game.
Yeah.
I think Oregon's going to win, man, but I do think it's going to be a really good game, and it won't shock me if Penn State defensively can cause a lot of problems for Oregon.
Yeah, I do kind of wonder if we've been talking about these games and, we're saying, maybe one of these teams angles for the 5 seed and whatnot. Maybe both these teams, knowing they're safely in the playoffs and they're just kind of playing for a first-round bye here in a Big Ten championship, but a first-round bye. Do you see them opening up the playbook a little bit more, maybe trying some things out that maybe they can use, future playoff games? And, we've seen Kotelnicki in that USC game pull out that formation, and he shifted everybody, and Tyler Warren was the center. And he snapped it, right? And he threw the ball down to the center. Like, stuff like that. Will you see Oregon do some stuff like that on offense? I don't know. It'll be interesting to kind of see, if they kind of play a little bit, if that changes James Franklin's mindset, like that fourth quarter of the Minnesota game where he went for that fake punt, is he a little more aggressive because, hey, we're in the playoffs, like we're fine, like it is what it is. And if this pays off, great. If not, okay. Like we know Dan Lanning's going to be aggressive, but will James Franklin be more aggressive is the question.
I think I could be wrong. I know in the bigger games he normally doesn't, but I mean, that fake punt that he did in the late in the fourth quarter against Minnesota recently, that was insane. Awesome that he did that, and he needed to do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, but both of these teams, like, Oregon here recently on the road at Wisconsin had a scare. Penn State went on the road at Minnesota, had a scare.
Yeah.
And when I took a deep dive into this, man, these teams really aren't that far apart at all from the metrics when you look into it. So that's why I think it's going to be – I just think at the end of the day, the speed differential, I trust Dylan Gabriel more. And early in his career, but Dan Lanning was not known to be some big game coach either until he beat Ohio State, which, we could make an argument for that too, that Ryan Day's not a big game coach either. But it won't shock me, man. If it will not shock. We're not going to be scared to pick games. I'm making you pick it too. You got to throw out a winner. I think Oregon wins the game, but I think it is a one possession game. And it won't shock me at all if this is somewhere between, I think it's going to be a one possession game, but Oregon wins. And I think the speed differential between both teams is what ends up doing it.
I think one of the most important players in the game is Jordan James, running back for Oregon. And I think that if he can run the ball and they can run the ball effectively, similarly as they did to Ohio State, I think they'll be in control of the game. Like you said, I don't think Penn State can manufacture points through the air. They're going to have to somehow hit big plays on the ground with their running backs. You might see a little bit more of Bo Prabula running a little, RPO option. stuff like that. So
they're going to have to manufacture offense differently than Oregon. Yep, I agree.
And the numbers and the metrics, I get all that. I understand all that. I understand where you're coming from. I'm sure that they've been super close to Ohio State every time they played them, and Ole Miss last year, and this has never worked out in their favor. Like we've always said about Penn State, they beat the teams that they're supposed to, and they lose to the teams they're supposed to.
Yep.
And I don't think that changes Saturday night. I'm taking Oregon. I'm taking Oregon to cover. So
it was 3.5, right?
3.5.
Okay. Is that a best bet?
Not a best bet.
Okay.
Not a best bet. Saturday night in Charlotte, North Carolina, Bank of America Stadium, Clemson Tigers take on the SMU Mustangs. SMU coming into their first ACC Conference Championship game as 2-point favorites over Dabo and the Tigers. Dabo, Clemson has played 33 games at a neutral site under him. Tigers are 21-12 straight up, 20-13 against the spread in those games. When Clemson is listed as an underdog at those neutral site games, 8-4 straight up, 9-3 against the spread, covering by an average of 12 points per game.
Nobody loves playing the underdog role than little old Clemson on the Roy bus there in Dabo.
Exactly. Dabo has coached in 9 conference championship games. The Tigers are 8-1 straight up and 7-2 against the spread. They've won 8 straight conference championship games since losing to Georgia Tech all the way back in 2009. And this will be just the second time Dabo and Clemson are underdogs in a title game. They were +7 in 2011 against your Virginia Tech Hokies, and they won 38-10. Clemson has also lost 3 consecutive games against the spread entering this title game versus SMU, the longest against the spread losing streak for any team in a title game this year. And over the last decade, teams entering a conference championship game on a 3+ game against the spread losing streak are 7-0 straight up and against the spread in their title games. Yeah. So they reverse the curse right there in those title games. On the SMU side, we'll talk a little bit about Rhett Lashley. He's been SMU's coach for a couple of years since 2022. SMU's 26-3 straight up and 17-12 against the spread as a favorite under Rhett, with losses to BYU twice and Boston College. Yet, Lashley and SMU have played 2 neutral site games together. They're 0-2 straight up, and they were favorites in both of those games. This one is obviously of importance to Clemson. Win and you're in. Depending on what you feel about the committee and how they're going to do things, SMU could possibly be a win and you're in situation, or lose and you're out, I guess. And this one is
win and they're in, but it could be a possibility that they lose and they're out. Again, we don't think that should happen, but it could be.
This one will be high on the ratings chart in Birmingham, Alabama, and across the entire state of Alabama Saturday night on ABC, I believe. So,
so here's the thing: SMU has played. SMU's a really good football team, but they've also played one of the weakest schedules. All the numbers tell you that one of the weakest schedules of any team in the Power Four. One of the weakest of all teams in the Power Four conferences. Their strength of schedule, I believe, is ranked somewhere in the 70s. So Clemson's got NFL dudes on the defensive line. They've got some game wreckers on the D-line. We saw last week against South Carolina, you and I were texting about it during the game. I mean, when Lenora Sellers would drop back to pass, there were orange jerseys in the backfield immediately all game long. They just couldn't corral him. They did not hold up in their rush lanes, and Sellers, being 6'3", 4", 240 pounds, whatever he is, and runs like an antelope and a great athlete that he is, he was able to escape it. And once he got by that first line of defense, he was able to keep running through the secondary.
Who else is a pretty good dual threat?
Exactly. And Jennings. Jennings is absolutely the QB for SMU. And SMU's got solid running backs. I mean, again, all of SMU's numbers, the numbers that they're a little skewed for me. I just don't know. Again, 2 things can be true. SMU's offense and defense could be absolutely so legit. It could be. I do think their offense is. Defensively, they are better than what probably most of you would think. But again, who is it against? Who is it against? Clemson's numbers offensively, they've righted the ship for the most part offensively. Problem is, again, Clemson has piled up some incredible offensive numbers this year against the worst competition that they've played. When they played against Georgia, they scored 3 points. When they played against Louisville, they did not. I think they did not score
21.
as many points against. 21 against Louisville. When they played against South Carolina, they did not score. Again, they're 3 losses. They didn't score
Virginia
as many
Tech
points.
and Pitt, they scored 24 points each.
Exactly. Yeah. So against the weaker competition, they lit it up. So I'll be honest with you, man. I think that Clemson's defensive line is going to wreak havoc in this game. And I think they're going to be the difference. I also believe, like you said, this is got, again, I could be way wrong, man. Like the best teams that Clemson have played this year, they've lost them all. But this has just this is like a Dabo Swinney game written all over it. Mm-hmm. He gets a second chance here. Like he seems so loose all week long. Like you said, all the numbers that you gave out of what he does in ACC championship games, this game in Charlotte, that place will be packed with purple and orange in Charlotte like they always do when they play those games there. And Klubnik has played well for the most part this year. SMU hasn't seen a back like Phil Maffa this year either. So I think you know where I'm going. I am making it a best bet. It might be my only best bet that I give out here in this episode today. But I think Clemson wins, and I think they cover. And then I think it's a scenario where the committee is going to be faced with what do they do with SMU. I think, again.
How much does Clemson win by?
How much do they have to win by?
What's your score prediction?
My score prediction? I'm going to say Clemson 31, SMU somewhere in the 20s, 20 to 24.
Okay. Is SMU out with a 7-point loss?
I don't believe they should be out.
Right.
I don't believe they should be out. But man, I'm just I'm not playing to the crowd here or anything. I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
Based off what War Manuel said. I mean, the reason why that they gave the nod over Alabama over Miami was because he cited immediately Alabama's 3-1 against ranked opponents and Miami's 0-1. SMU would be 0-2.
Yeah.
Against ranked opponents. So I don't know. I don't think they should, but if you actually look at the metrics, if SMU were to lose this game, man, strength of schedule, strength of record, 0-2 against ranked teams that the committee obviously values, be interesting. But again, I'm saying it again. I don't think that if you're squarely in the playoff field, number 8 in the country like SMU is, that they would have been better off just missing their flight to Charlotte if they were to lose this game and then not make it in the CFP. But I think Clemson and Dabo are going to back their way into this. And if they did, it would make my preseason. Everybody, like all the Clemson fans, think I hate them for what I said a few weeks ago, that I just didn't think they should be an at-large playoff team and they should have to win the ACC to get in the ACC championship game, which, by the way, all of you, thank you, that ended up being correct. I also picked Clemson to go over 8.5 wins, cash money, won that. And I also picked Clemson for the season to win the ACC championship when everybody else was picking Miami and Florida State. I picked Clemson to win the ACC championship. So if that happens, I'll win that as well. So I'm sticking with it. I'm not hedging it. I think Clemson wins this game and covers.
Why do people always talk about the record against ranked teams? Why don't they talk about record against unranked teams? Wouldn't that be worse? Right? I mean, what's SMU's record against unranked teams, right? They're undefeated.
Yes, they are.
So, that old adage of if you're in a must-win situation, you must not be very good, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that accurately describes the Clemson Tigers, unfortunately. They're a good team. They're just not very good. Like we said a couple weeks ago, they did not deserve to be at that 12 spot. They did not deserve to be in that large team or even under a large consideration, and they proved us right. Again, that South Carolina game. These two teams have played common opponents 5 times this year, and SMU has looked more impressive against every single opponent that they've played.
Yep.
It's against Stanford, they won by 30. Against Florida State, they won by 26. They beat Virginia by more. They went on the road and beat Louisville by 7 when Clemson got them at home and lost by 12. They Clemson needed a Cade Klubnik last-second touchdown to beat Pitt, and Pittsburgh was ranked 18th in the time when SMU played them, and they won by 23. So what do you think happened to Pitt after that? They dropped out of the top 25, so it's no longer a ranked win.
And didn't Pitt play their backup quarterback against Clemson?
Yeah.
And they did. Then they had
Nate
their starter
Yarnell.
against SMU, right?
Exactly.
They
so
had Eli Holstein then, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what kind of Rhett Lashley was talking about. It's like, well, what if we go into Pitt and we smack them 48-25 when they're ranked 18th, and you guys think they're not good anymore? You don't rank them, so that we don't get credit for a ranked win. Yeah. It's the dumbest thing in the world. It's the dumbest thing in the world.
Yeah,
I think SMU wants to come into this game. I think they want to make a statement, and I'm taking them to win this game.
Okay. Love Rhett Lashley, by the way. He's been very impressive this week in a lot of his interviews that I've heard him in. And again, I think SMU's got the cash to be able to keep him. If they, I don't think it'll be money, but Lashley's going to be a really hot name at some of the biggest jobs in college football. If they were to come open, it would just be a deal if he would want those jobs or not.
Exactly.
All right. So you're taking SMU to win, and I took Clemson to win and cover. Okay. Is this
going head-to-head?
This is the first one that we've differed on.
Okay. Moving on. Saturday at noon Eastern, Jerry World, AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas, the Big 12 championship game between the Iowa State Cyclones versus the Arizona State Sun Devils. Sun Devils come into this game favored by 2 points. Arizona State enters the title game on a 5-game straight up and against the spread winning streak. Major conference teams, P4 teams, P5 including the Pac-12, entering their title game on a 5+ game straight up and against the spread winning streak, are 7-4 against the spread since 1992. We all know about Matt Campbell as an underdog, right? And it's been that way ever since he's been at Toledo. It's stayed that way at Iowa State. He is good as an underdog. He's 36-23-3 straight up. And I think it gets even better when it's within that field goal range, which this game is. Last note on the Big 12 championship game, when the Big 12 title game is played at a neutral site, the favorite has won 12 straight outright. Last loser coming in 2003 when Oklahoma lost to Kansas State. That plays in the Sun Devils' favor here. So you got Sam Levitt, you got Rocco Becht, you've got a really, really good Arizona State rushing attack with Cam Skattebo going against a very poor rush defense in Iowa State. That's where they struggle a little bit.
Iowa State's 96th in the country, giving up 174 yards per game in the rush yards. Yeah,
and I want to say yards per carry, they're like 112th. They're like 5.1 yards per carry.
And Skattebo's number 9 in the country in rushing touchdowns and number 8 in the country in rushing yards at 1,400 yards and 17 tutties.
Yep. But if you look at this game and you look at power ratings like S&P Plus and Kelly Ford, it actually it points in the direction of Iowa State. And one thing that really, really hurts the Sun Devils, and I saw this come across the ticker last night, Jordan Tyson, wide receiver, is out.
Yeah, he's a 1,000-yard receiver with 10 touchdowns. Yeah. Their next leading receiver, Skattebo.
Yeah, he's going to have to do it all for them on Saturday afternoon. Yeah. I think he can.
He can. He absolutely can. Him and Levitt both in the run game.
This truly is, these teams are ranked number 15 and 16. This truly is a playoff game. Like, this is your playoff game of the weekend. This and Boise and UNLV are playoff games.
Dude, I don't mean to cut, but isn't this like exactly how it should be with this conference? We called it America's Conference before, like Josh Pate calls it America's Conference. You called it the Conference of Chaos before the year ever started.
Yep.
We talked about it in the preseason deal when we broke down the Big 12, that if you are a fan of like just the purest form of college football and what it always used to be before NIL, like you going and developing kids and bringing kids into your program, redshirting them, developing them. They're not getting paid $8 zillion to play for your team. That is what these two teams are. Kenny Dillingham and Matt Campbell are just two coaches that, I mean, unless you're rivals of these two teams, I don't know anybody that hates these two coaches, man. These are two coaches that I personally love to death too. So I just think it's fitting that this is the game of the weekend that is like a de facto playoff game. Whoever wins is in. Whoever loses, you're out.
Yeah, in my opinion, the Big 12 conference is better than the ACC conference.
I agree.
The ACC's just had more top-heavy teams,
Yep.
and the Big 12 is similar to the Pac-12 last year, where they just kept beating up on each other, where you had teams like Oregon State last year who was really good, and you couldn't get over the hump because you ran into Washington, you ran into Oregon. So I think it's a really good conference. Should be a really good game Saturday. But I think Scatabo is he's one of the big X factors in this game for me.
Yeah, I agree. Something that like you said, Iowa State hasn't been good against the run, but I went back and looked at it last week. It's a pretty good tune-up for this one. You had a dual threat quarterback that you were facing in Avery Johnson in Farmageddon, DJ Giddens, tailback for Kansas State. Very similar to what you're getting this week. Scatabo's been a little bit better this year, obviously overall. And Arizona State, they're going to be able to. They have a dual threat quarterback as well in Levitt. So it's an interesting tune-up game. And Iowa State did a really good job of keeping that rushing attack in check for Kansas State last week. But then again, you go look at some of their other games. They did not keep UCS rushing attack in check. They did not keep Kansas's rushing attack in check. So the common opponent deal there on some of these teams, it's obvious. If Iowa State, it's very simple. If Iowa State, I don't necessarily think they have to stop Scatabo. They need to be able to just somewhat slow him down, and then they need to make Arizona State kick field goals when they get it in the red zone. Because I do think that, Iowa State's defense, the 3-3-5 stack they run, the defensive coordinator, John Heacock, that defense was literally brought to the Big 12 and for Iowa State to be able to stop the passing attacks going on at that time during the Big 12 play. And it did just that for the longest time. Sometimes it's a little more susceptible to the rush because obviously you've only got 3 down linemen. You don't have as much beef up front. But there have been years they haven't been able to do it. I just think that John Heacock, one of the best defensive coordinators in all of the Big 12, he's proven it over the years. He's going to come up with, again, they know it. It's Cam Scatabo. And obviously now with Jordan Tyson being out, like you said, it is literally what can we do to stop him or to slow him down. Another thing that's interesting, you know that Iowa State is the only team in the entire country that has 2 1,000-yard receivers. Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel both have 1,000 yards, and they've got 15 touchdowns combined.
Okay.
So, Rocco Becht, he's capable of going in there and lighting this game up and taking over this game with his arm, with those 2 receivers. But he's also capable of throwing multiple picks in this game. I did some dig again on some of these numbers. Both of these teams don't really get after the quarterback much and don't have a lot of tackles for a loss. They're both pretty poor in that scenario. So I don't really know how much they're going to be able to affect Levitt in the passing game if he's in the pocket or Rocco Becht when he's in the pocket. Both are very solid in the turnover margin. Both do a really good job of intercepting passes. They're both 2 of the best teams in the country of intercepting the ball on the defensive side. So, again, that's something to look for in regards to, obviously, Iowa State's going to air it out more with Rocco Becht and those 2 receivers. Can Arizona State pick them off? For me, it just comes down to, can Iowa State slow down Cam Scatabo? And I went back and forth on this. There is absolutely no best. This is the biggest crapshoot, in my opinion, of any of the games this weekend. I think Matt Campbell, who's come close in the Big 12, back in 2020, they got beat in the Big 12 championship game by Oklahoma in just a heartbreaker. I think Matt Campbell and Iowa State and the Clones get it done in this game. I think Rocco Becht and those 2 receivers make a difference. I think John Heacock and that comes up with a defensive game plan to be able. I think Scatabo will get his. I think he'll cross the century line and get 100+ yards. But I think they slow him down enough, and I think that Iowa State wins this game, and obviously they cover because they're an underdog. So I think Iowa State wins this game and covers, but it's not a best bet. I'm taking the Clones. I'm
with you. I'm taking Iowa State as well.
Okay.
I think Iowa State goes in. I think they get the job done. I think it's a lot easier just to key on one guy. And if somehow Arizona State finds a really quick replacement for Jordan Tyson, and they find a guy who similarly in college basketball, a guy that's not even on the scouting report, comes out and starts making threes, and you didn't even know he was on the team.
Like Duke
if
did
they
last night.
they get something like that, then I'll be surprised. But I think Iowa State, like you said, I think Matt Campbell as an underdog is really good. Arizona State has had a heck of a season. Kenny Dillingham not going anywhere. He's going to stay in Arizona State for a while, I think. He's going to build that program.
It's from there.
Yeah, they've got some money out there in Arizona and everything. I think he's always asking for NIL money, right? So they're going to get some money in there. They're going to get some players in there. They've already got a lot of talent around there to recruit those players. So to get those players to come in and play for them. So I think that this isn't their year, though. It's Iowa State's year. And I think just, using the underdog rule, I think Iowa State goes in there and they get the job done.
I agree.
Friday night. And this one is not a neutral site. This one is out on the blue carpet in Boise, Idaho, where the UNLV Rebels are taking on the Boise State Broncos. Boise State just a 4-point favorite at home on a Friday night, where the weather looks like it's going to be about 26 degrees at kickoff.
Bringing the Rebs out of the dome.
Yep. Teams that lost to their conference championship opponent in the same season as the title game are 26-42 straight up, and an even 33-2 against the spread since 1999. And since 2010, they're 18-29 straight up. So the rematches don't necessarily go the other way, which obviously touches on Georgia-Texas earlier. That plays in Georgia's favor. UNLV has had its issues with Boise State. I'm not sure if you know this, but the Runnin' Rebels have lost 8 straight meetings outright against the Broncos. Their last win against Boise State came back in. You care to take a guess?
No, go ahead. Just tell me.
1976.
Golly, man.
UNLV has lost 3 straight against the spread versus Boise State. Their last time they covered against the Broncos was in 2016. This game took place earlier this year in October. It was one of UNLV's 2 losses this year. In Allegiant Stadium, Boise State covered that game. They were 4.5 point favorites. They won 29-24.
I had a minus. I had a -3 and a hook.
Yep. And props to UNLV though. We kind of said it from the very beginning that they were one of the teams to look for because they scheduled very, very well in the out of conference. They scheduled 3 Power 4 teams.
Yep.
And they beat 2 of them, and they lost to Syracuse in overtime, which obviously we just saw Syracuse go 9-3. So that's not necessarily a terrible loss for UNLV.
44-41 in overtime. Great game.
Yep. Couldn't get it done against Boise State, though. Obviously, the big story here is this is a playoff game as well. So whoever wins this game will be in the G5 spot. If it's UNLV, they're going to be the 12 seed. If it's Boise State, whether you like it or not, they're probably going to get a bye. Yep. Which is, again, we're not going to get into that discussion right now, but another big story, obviously, is Ashton Jeanty. He's going to be invited to New York after this game to be a Heisman finalist. Odds are saying right now he's not going to win it, but he's got one more data point. If he comes out this game and he puts up 250 and 3 touchdowns, maybe that gets people to vote a little different. I don't know.
He only averaged 3.9 yards per carry, which is one of the lower of his yards per carry against UNLV last time when they played earlier this year.
Yep. So, again, another question. Boise State -4 on their home field against UNLV. What are we doing? Why are we not betting the Broncos right now?
Yeah, this may end up being a best bet. I just may just I'm not going to even look into a bunch of numbers or anything. I just may just take a shot here and just say that Boise -4 on the blue carpet in a conference championship game, playing a team that plays indoors. Like you said, they've owned UNLV forever. Play the odds. I almost think, too, it's poetic justice that in the first year of the 12-team playoff at the group of 5 team that ends up making it for, Boise State put the G5 on the map.
Yeah.
At the very beginning.
Carried them for a long time.
With Chris Peterson in that bunch, and they just kept it rolling through multiple coaches. But again, this is pretty simple. Can UNLV, can they stop Ashton Jeanty? I don't think you stop them. The last time that these 2 teams played, I talked about it going into the game, and you gave me props for it afterwards. as I said, when you just get so geared up to stop a running back, it's got to open up some things in the passing game and the play action game. And I mean, Madsen did not have some like just light it up by any means, but he did have over 200 yards passing and threw for a touchdown against UNLV in that game. And I mean, and two, Boise's defense in that game against UNLV earlier this year, when they held UNLV to only 16 first downs. I mean, overall, neither team really lit it up offensively. Both defenses kind of mostly controlled the game for the most part. UNLV's got some dudes, though. Some really good skill position players, a solid dual threat quarterback. So I still, it's just hard for me to go against Boise on the blue carpet, man. I'm not going to just step out and throw out UNLV here and say this is the time that they're going to do it. Maybe they do. Maybe they do. But I think Boise gets it done and wins this game. I'll have to see it to believe if UNLV can go in 20-degree weather on the blue carpet and take care of business against Boise.
Yeah. I'll tell you right now, this is a best bet for me. I'm going to take Boise State -4.
Okay.
At home. I think they get it done. I think Spencer Danielson in his first year gets it done. I just think that they have the best player on the field. I know Haj Malik Williams for UNLV is a solid dual threat quarterback, like you said. I just think Boise State, I know they've been one of those teams to kind of play down to their competition a little bit as well with Wyoming and Nevada, but again, they own UNLV for some reason. And if I'm proven wrong on Friday night, then I'm proven wrong. But I'm taking UNLV -4, and I'm taking taking Boise State -4, and I'm taking Boise State to break into the college football playoff. One game we aren't going to spend too much time on, we'll talk about a little bit, is Tulane and Army. Just real quick notes on it. I mean, Army is 5.5 point underdogs at home. It's going to be in West Point. It's, again, mid-20s weather. A lot of cadets just yelling right in your face. You got choppers flying above, creating all kinds of noise. I just think Tulane's getting a lot of respect in the odds market here. You know, I've always backed the troops. I'm not going to bet this game, but I've always backed the troops. But it's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top in that one. I know you had some nuggets there from Sumrall and everything.
Yeah, so because I actually bet on Troy multiple times against the academies when he was the head coach at Troy the last couple of years. So Sumrall, head coach at Tulane, one of the best coaches in the G5. He was at Troy the last few years, and I mean, what he did to the academy, what he's done to the academies the last 3 years. I mean, this year he shut out Navy, he shut out Army. He's played Army twice in the last 2 years. Army scored like 9 points, and then he shut them out. So Army has not been able to do anything offensively against his teams, and thought this was interesting. I'm like, what is it that they're doing that other teams aren't? Because these other G5 teams do not shut out Navy and Army. I mean, Navy and Army don't score on Notre Dame, and they don't score against the P4 teams, but they do work on offense against these G5 teams.
Mm-hmm.
The defensive coordinator for Sumrall and Tulane, who was also with them at Troy, used to be the defensive coordinator at Army, under Munkin at Army. So obviously he knows a little bit about the triple option, and I know that Army doesn't run necessarily just the old traditional way of the triple option, but still he knows the principles of it. And it's obvious, again, I don't know how much that matters or whatever, but now we've got 3 games to go off of in the last 2 years that they've played this offense. Shut out, 9 points. So obviously Sumrall and this defensive coordinator for Tulane got something figured out against this option for the academies. So it still may end up being a best bet. I actually did make it earlier in the week and ended up canceling it.
That weather.
It's not just the weather, man. It's just the part of like college football more than any other sport, man. College hoops too. But these home environments in some of these big games, I mean, the troops getting a home game for a conference championship game up at West Point.
First year in the American too.
Yeah, man, that is a big deal.
Yeah.
So I think Tulane is a much better football team. If this was on a neutral field or at Tulane, this would be one of those they can't make that line high enough type deal.
Mm-hmm.
But with it being at Army, I don't know. I still may end up taking a shot at Tulane because, again, they've got athletes and dudes on the defensive line. Offensively, Menza, the quarterback for Tulane, has been a really good dual threat quarterback this year. Love Sumrall. Also, are we sure that he's not just sitting there waiting to be the next coach at like one of these openings? Because he's obviously one of the hottest names out there.
Yeah.
He wins conference championships at Troy. Then the first year he goes to Tulane, and all these dudes transfer and leave after Willie Fritz goes to Houston, and they just don't miss a beat, and they're sitting here in the conference championship game again. So I don't know if that's part of it. But yeah, I think Tulane wins the game. I'll still say that, but I'm not making it a best bet.
Okay. Usually around this time of the episode, you'll hear that big upset alert alarm. Not today. We don't have any upset alerts, at least right now. So we're not going to put any out. Best bets wise, I'm on Boise State -4. That's my only one so far. I think you've only got one right now, right?
Yeah, Clemson
plus 2.5, something like that.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to sprinkle a little on the money line as well.
Okay. So that's it for us. Conference Championship weekend is here. We will be back. If you're listening to this, we'll be back on Sunday at noon Eastern, live on X and YouTube as the college football playoff rankings are finally revealed. We'll know who exactly what the bracket looks like for the 20th and the 21st and so on. So we can't wait for that, but also we want to watch these games this weekend, get these extra 13th data points for a lot of these teams so we can really, really evaluate them. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Follow along, subscribe, like, share, all the good stuff. It's been a fun football season. We got a good postseason ahead, so we'll be back on Sunday. Until next time, thanks.